Perfect. So, Mr. President, with that, I'll hand over to you to start the meeting.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary General, and it is good to see all of you today. It's our first opportunity to get together in the new year, and I want to welcome all of you to the online edition of our Transatlantic Forum. Welcome as well to our partners from the Atlantic Council and the National Defense University, where we normally would have gathered in person, but for the COVID-19 pandemic. I also want to particularly thank my friend and colleague, Mike Turner, for joining our discussion today. Mike is the former president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, but he's been a mentor to me. He helped recruit me, actually, to become a member of the U.S. delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly and has provided strong bipartisan leadership in a difficult time for NATO and for the Transatlantic Alliance. And so I salute Mike for his leadership and his steadfastness in supporting this very important alliance, both as a collective security organization, but also maybe more importantly, an organization committed to shared democratic values. Mike, thank you for all you've done. Linda Sanchez and Philemon Vela are respectively the new acting head and deputy head of the United States delegation. They've provided wonderful leadership in our delegation. They've been very active members, and we add another woman to the bureau in our new head of the U.S. delegation, Linda and Philemon. Thank you so much for all of your leadership. Before we begin, sadly, I must share the news of the passing of our colleague and our friend, Miroslav Tudjman, who is the head of the Croatian delegation. Miroslav was a highly respected voice in Croatia and an esteemed colleague for all of us. He was a statesman, a real intellectual, and a gentleman. Miroslav joined the NATO Parliamentary Assembly in 2012 and had been leading the Croatian delegation since 2016. He had just been re-elected to a fourth term in the Croatian parliament last summer. Our thoughts and prayers are with his widow, his family, and all of his friends and colleagues in the Croatian parliament. I'd like to suggest we keep a moment of silence in his memory. Mr. Bacic is the deputy head of the Croatian delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. If you are on, Mr. Bacic, I would be glad to hand the floor to you for any remarks you may wish to make with respect to our fallen colleague, Mr. Tudjman.
We have brought Mr. Bacic on screen. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, greetings to all. Thank you, Mr. President, for this moment of silence for our professor. Dear Mr. President of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Gerald Connolly, distinguished fellow NATO parliamentarians, Madam NATO PA Secretary General, Mrs. Ruxandra Popa, dear colleagues. Allow me to take the floor and say a few words on this sad occasion, the passing of the Croatian head of delegation, our much esteemed Professor Miroslav Tudjman, who had left us on Sunday after his struggle with the coronavirus disease. He will be greatly missed, since we lost not just a prominent scholar and politician who gave a contribution to making his father's and our first president's ever vision creation of free, sovereign, independent and democratic Croatia. But we also lost a truly accomplished person who at the same time was so humble and kind. He always showed respect for all of his colleagues, regardless of their political affiliation. As the oldest and one of the most experienced MPs, to many particularly young colleagues like me, he served as an example of a man from whom to learn. He always conducted all of his duties in a very responsible, honest and professional way. During his parliamentary career, he chaired the NATO PA delegation twice. His second re-election to this position took place last summer during the midst of pandemic that will prove to be fatal somewhat later for our dear professor. In his political work, he was focused primarily on defense and security domains and was always a dedicated and strong supporter of democracy, transatlantic solidarity, and unity. His prudence, calm nature, kindness, moral integrity, and dedication will be always remembered, as will the overall accomplishments of his great person never fade away in the collective memory of the Croatian people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And again, all our thoughts and all of our sympathy go with you and your colleagues. And please convey our deep sympathy to Mr. Tudjman's family as well. Your loss is also our loss.
I will. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I mentioned this is our first large meeting this year. It's been an eventful start of the year, certainly for those of us in the United States. I know many of you followed the assault on our capital on January 6th with concern. And I want to thank you for the many, many messages of support and expressions of concern we've received from all of you. This was obviously not just an assault in the United States, it was an assault on the symbol of freedom and democracy around the world. However, democracy prevailed that day as my colleagues and I returned to the House chamber to complete our constitutional duties to certify the election of Joe Biden as president and Kamala Harris as vice president of the United States. By doing so, right up to 3:32 in the morning, we affirmed that the United States lives by the rule of law and not by the rule of the mob. The lesson we should all draw from these events is that democracy, while resilient, is also fragile. We must constantly work to protect it, expand it, and strengthen our ability to resist and counter attempts from within as well as without to undermine it. As you know, I've made affirming our internal commitment to shared democratic values a key priority. The common values underpinning NATO have been pivotal to maintaining alliance cohesion. They are also the strongest weapon we possess to effectively counter the authoritarianism of Vladimir Putin or President Xi of China. To support this priority, I propose the establishment of a Democratic Resilience Coordination Center within NATO, not as an outside center of excellence. To support, I'm gratified to have the support of the group of experts on NATO 2030, which has endorsed the proposal in their report to the NATO Secretary General. I've also discussed this specific proposal with the Secretary General of NATO in our phone conversation of 19 January. We'll follow up on the proposal during our upcoming joint meetings on the 1st and 2nd of March. Coming back to our agenda here in the United States, as you know, we now have a new Congress and a new administration, and we're hard at work. One of our top priorities this week is a $1.9 trillion U.S. coronavirus relief bill. My colleagues and I would be glad to speak about that if you have any questions. Obviously, there are differences about the size and scope, but responding quickly to both the economic and public health crisis is imperative. I've mentioned to you before that President Biden is a strong believer in NATO. I worked for Joe Biden for 10 years in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He was chairman of the European Affairs Subcommittee during that time period. I know his commitment firsthand. One of his first calls following his inauguration on January 20th was to NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on 26th of January. In this conversation, he reaffirmed the United States' unwavering commitment to NATO and to Article 5 in particular. He conveyed his intention to consult and work with allies in the full range of shared security concerns, including Afghanistan, Iraq, and Russia. The president also emphasized the importance of shared values, consultation, and capabilities to strengthen deterrence and counter new and emerging threats, including climate change and global health security. Our new Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, and Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, are also genuine transatlanticists and believers in the value of our unique transatlantic alliance. So I'm confident you will see from this administration over the coming months a clear commitment to reinvigorate and strengthen the transatlantic bond and the United States' commitment to it, and to return to a relationship with our allies based on respect and trust and a healthy dose of humility. We face a number of important decisions in the weeks and months to come. We must urgently start developing a transatlantic approach to China, as our Assembly has called for at our annual meeting. We must continue to stand up to Russia's ongoing unacceptable violations, including its illegal occupation of Crimea, which we will never recognize. We must also condemn President Putin's ruthless repression against his own population and the politically motivated persecution against his opponents. The poisoning of Alexei Navalny, his arrest and now decision to convert his suspended sentence into time in prison for another 2 years are blatant evidence of the regime's complete disregard for human life, fundamental freedoms, and the rule of law and due process. At the same time, we must work with Russia on arms control. I welcome that we're in the final stages of extending New START, but we have an incredibly daunting and urgent arms control agenda ahead of us. We must also urgently revive the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear agreement, to get Iran back into compliance with its commitments. As you know, the United States has stated its willingness to rejoin under certain conditions, but Iran must provide clear and verifiable reassurance for that to happen. Another important decision we face in the coming months concerns our engagement in Afghanistan. The administration has made clear the Taliban have not met their commitments, and so we must ensure that we remain able to protect our interests and that of our Afghan partners, and that particularly goes to Afghan women. We cannot have an agreement that makes women in Afghanistan new victims of Taliban depredations. As we grapple with the devastating impact of COVID, in the coming months, all of us will face strong pressures to cut defense budgets. I'd like to urge all of you to hold the line. As I've just laid out, we face a large set of urgent priorities despite the pandemic, and maybe enhanced by the pandemic. We need a strong defense now more than ever. With this, let me stop and hand over to my colleagues to speak about these and other priorities for our Congress. As you know, our delegation has a strong tradition of working on a bipartisan basis. It's essential for us all to speak with one voice in NATO and our commitment to transatlantic security. Mike and Philemon have both served in the Armed Services Committee, so they're our defense experts. Linda serves in the Ways and Means Committee in the Congress, one of the most important committees because it's the tax writing committee that funds everything we do. So she has a cross-cutting perspective on many of the issues we face and we discuss here today. Thank you, Madam Secretary General. I yield the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And perhaps we can give the floor to Mike Turner to start for our panel for the rest. We can't hear you. Let me see.
Mike, you're muted.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll turn it on.
You're muted.
Yeah, let's see. Try again.
Okay.
I did on our sides. Can you check again? No? Hey. It was working earlier. Let's see. Okay. Oh, no. No, it seems fine on our sides. Sorry about that. Could you try to just refresh the page and request the floor again? And now we've lost Linda Sanchez as well. If I could also ask Linda Sanchez to come back.
Is anyone monitoring this?
You're the only one who's able to watch it.
Okay.
You want me to go into the...
And perhaps, since we have Linda Sanchez on screen, maybe we can start with you, if that's all right, Congresswoman.
Certainly. Thank you so much, and I hope that we can figure out Mike's audio issues. I want to begin by thanking our NATO PA President, Congressman Connolly, and my colleagues for the opportunity to join you all today. It's very important for everybody to understand what is happening throughout the alliance. I really appreciate the chance to share my perspective of what I think we can expect in the United States this year. I don't have a crystal ball to tell you how this year is going to play out, but I think it's safe to say that after one of the worst years of our lives, 2021 could not be more important. After the failed insurrection on January 6th, it should be clear to everyone that our biggest institution, that our institutions are also facing the biggest challenges that they perhaps have ever faced. Like many of my colleagues, I was in the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, and I think we're all going to be processing those events for many, many months to come. The former president attempted to disrupt the peaceful transition of power by ginning up a violent mob and it was fueled by a relentless feedback loop of disinformation in the right-wing ecosystem. The U.S. needs to heal, and we can only begin to heal through accountability. So I'm hopeful that the Senate will conduct a just trial on the second impeachment of former President Trump. But this issue is bigger than more than one man, even if he is a former president. Western democracies need to honestly deal with the rising threat of disinformation and conspiracy theories that led to the failed insurrection. And that threat isn't unique to the United States. As a special rapporteur on the CDS committee, I look forward to studying this issue and identifying ways that we can all work together to protect our institutions. But in order for us to truly turn the page, we must make life meaningfully better for everyone who has been hurting so much, especially during the pandemic. And that is why Congress is working with the president to dramatically scale up vaccine distribution and deliver robust financial relief to working families and small businesses. President Biden and majorities in both chambers of Congress understand the enormity of the challenges that we are facing, and we're prepared to do what we must in order to meet the moment. This year will also be an important opportunity to make progress on issues that we have just put off for far too long. One aspect of restoring America's place in the world is honoring our heritage as a nation of immigrants. As the daughter of immigrant parents from Mexico who came to the United States to build a better life, this issue is extremely close to my heart, and I am proud that I will be leading President Biden's immigration reform effort in the House of Representatives. I'm going to do everything that I can to see that we finally deliver real reform, because our country is stronger when we have an effective and a transparent immigration system where we can focus on the people that are coming here and avoid the elements that we don't want. Like other nations, the United States is facing many, many different challenges, but they really are, I believe, once-in-a-lifetime opportunities to make life better for the people that we serve. So what you will see in this new administration is a serious commitment to our alliances and to policy solutions that are backed by fact and courage to face up to those facts and to science. If we can make measurable progress now while we have this opportunity, I believe that we can pull ourselves up and restore some of our faith in our institutions. So that's just a brief synopsis of what I see as the most important issues that we will be grappling with in the near-term future. And I again want to thank Jerry Connolly for the opportunity to share my perspective, and I look forward to your questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And let's try Mike Turner now. Again, let's hope it works now.
Okay, great.
Excellent.
Thank you, Roxandra. I want to thank our president. Jerry and I are very good friends, and I want to say that I appreciate his leadership. He is not only bipartisan in his leadership of our delegation, but he's nonpartisan in his representation of the United States, and I think that is just the highest level of professionalism. When he speaks on behalf of our delegation, I can tell you that he has the support of everyone, and I think if you listen to his presentation of the issues that we're facing as a country and the issues that we're going to be facing as a Congress, everyone in our delegation would resoundingly agree of both his characterization and the importance of each of those issues. Take a few of the ones that Jerry had raised, and also Linda, and taking from those some of the policy debates and discussions that we're going to have in Congress. I greatly appreciate the way Jerry had characterized the issue of our approach to defense. Defense spending is going to be an important issue that we're going to be debating. We have been on a modest increase of defense spending coming out of the sequestration period, where we had real reductions in the United States readiness, which of course affected the United States and our allies. Our attempts at increasing defense spending were to try to balance both fixing the issue of readiness, but also looking to modernization that had been delayed and then looking to what is now real threats by our near-peer adversaries of Russia and China. I know you're all studying what Russia and China are doing, both in all of their systems, but also in their nuclear systems. I appreciate Jerry's statement of looking to an era of arms control. I think that's incredibly important. One of the debates that we'll have in Congress, obviously, is the balance between arms control and unilateral disarmament. Unfortunately, and this is very public, everyone is aware that the United States has, for a long time, deferred both its maintenance and its modernization of its nuclear deterrent. In order to make certain that we have a reliable and effective deterrent, we're having to undertake modernization. Unlike Russia and China, we're not seeking new capabilities. But this modernization must go forward, even in a period of arms control. We're not going to be able to step back from being able to work to maintain the capabilities that we have, because they are of such a critical path in nature right now. I appreciated Jerry's comments with respect to our response to COVID. As you know, the United States is undertaking a significant inoculation, vaccination process. That is being coordinated in each of the states, and it seems to be going well. Our focus, of course, is vulnerable populations and the elderly populations first. And then I think Jerry is absolutely correct that this is going to be a very good time period for relations between NATO and the United States. I jointly received with Vice President Biden an award from Montenegro with respect to the expansion that NATO had undertaken as a result of his advocacy post the Obama administration. So I know that he's not only strongly for the transatlantic relationship, a strong NATO and U.S. bond, but also making certain that we have a great working relationship and the capabilities of NATO to be able to defend both the United States and our allies. Jerry, I just want to thank you again. You're doing a great job, and you represent us so well for the United States. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turner, and welcome, Congressman Valla. Very sorry for the technical issues that you faced joining us, but we're delighted that you were able to join us. And so we've already started with our panel, and I would like now to give the floor to you for some opening remarks before we open the floor for questions from other NATO PA members. Welcome again, and good morning.
Good morning. And I could hear everything everybody said. I could hear you, you just couldn't see or hear me. But I join my colleagues today and agree with all of their remarks. You know, it was 2 years ago that Speaker Pelosi joined us in Brussels, and she made clear our total commitment to our NATO allies to be there to partner with you in the future. And now with Vice President Biden, I think it's pretty clear that he has the same commitment. So I join my colleagues in their optimism as we face the future together in light of the devastating consequences of the pandemic that all of us have had to deal with. Really, our focus here in the United States as we begin this new session of Congress is the pandemic. The package that Jerry talked about that we are about to pass through the House of Representatives will provide economic relief and hopefully improve the health of Americans everywhere. And I know that together as NATO allies that we can improve health and economic conditions on both our continents. But it's a pleasure to be here and happy to join my colleagues in answering any questions as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. So let us now begin with the discussion. And I already have several requests for the floor. Let me start with Lord Campbell from the United Kingdom.
My apologies. I had a bit of trouble connecting. And so if these issues I'm about to raise have been dealt with, my apologies. First of all, it is very good to see our American colleagues in such good heart. And it's no secret that the strength of the NATO PA depends always upon the strength and commitment of our American colleagues. I want to ask two questions, if I may. Over here, we're attaching a great amount of significance to the New START treaty? Are we right to do so? And secondly, are we also right to understand that while the language of President Biden may not match that of his predecessor, nonetheless, he will be as enthusiastic about the commitment, particularly among European members of NATO, to the 2%?
And if you don't mind, maybe I'll take a second one because the list is growing. So in the interest of time, I'll try to group a couple of questions. And the next one is from the leader of the French delegation, Christian Cambon.
Voilà, bonjour à tous. Monsieur le
Good morning, or good afternoon rather, to everyone. Mr. President, thank you once again for having convened all of us here, and thank you for having talked about the transatlantic relations, which is extremely important within the NATO PA. And I believe that we all think that it can be even more dynamic, this transatlantic relation. It's a pleasure to hear how you want to make the values of this alliance live on, and especially thanks to the arrival of President Biden. And I here wish to express my sympathy to all of the congressmen and women of the US who have gone through this attack. And I want to show how we need to strengthen and always bolster our values, because they can always be threatened. I believe that our values are as attractive as they have ever been, and we can see that through our other countries who would wish to join our alliance. And this is embodied in our alliance in two ways. First, I believe allies must support each other on all flanks of the alliance. To the east, by taking part in reassurance measures in air policing. And as you know, France, of course, assumes its responsibility in this matter. But let's not forget the southern flank and the support that some of our allies have given to the MINUSMA in Sahel and in other areas. And let's not forget all the way in which our allies take part in helping all this area in Sahel and the south. The second part is the political renovation of our alliance. NATO 2030 is one of them. We have to strengthen peaceful exchanges between allies. All of these efforts are necessary, and your actions, dear President, and your predecessor was absolutely beneficial. As you know, France restates its important place within NATO, and it's only as part of international dialogue that we will consolidate our security architecture. We need to strengthen not only our dialogue within institutions, but I also believe each country must also make more efforts. France does that through its military programming law, with $30 billion every year that goes towards defense in France. And I think this is a testimony to the way in which France wants to take part in this assembly. Thank you.
Allied unity, cohesion, East-South, and then NATO 2030. Mr. President, would you like to start or yield the floor?
Yeah, thank you. I saw Mike Turner raise his hand, so I'm going to defer to Mike Turner.
Okay. There we go again. Let's try. Hope doesn't happen every time. Okay. Seems fine on our side again. I am so sorry. I'm not sure why it does that every time. It looks the microphone is on our end. Yeah, here we go. Very sorry. Linda Sanchez, did I see a hand up?
Yeah, I thought that while Mike sorts out his audio issues, I could at least answer one of the questions regarding President Biden's approach. And I do know that he is very much in favor of re-engaging with our allies to deal with common challenges like the global pandemic, climate change, and the rise in authoritarianism. He also is going to renew our commitment to multilateral institutions like the World Health Organization, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the NATO alliance. I think he is very much committed to restoring trust in the U.S.'s commitment to democracy. So I'll just speak to that point, and hopefully Mike's audio is working now.
Sorry again about that.
Good morning again. Yes, I think it's working. Great, thank you. I just want to reiterate what Jerry had said in response to Lord Campbell. The START agreement that the Biden administration has extended, upon their extension, they made a statement that they expected that extending the START agreement was with the expectation that there would be commencement of negotiations for arms control. And I appreciated Jerry raising that issue. What's going to be so important is not just START itself, but what comes next. Because as you know, under START, Russia both developed and deployed weapons that violated the INF Treaty, developed and tested Skyfall, their nuclear-powered orbiting nuclear weapon, and of course have been developing Poseidon, their underwater drone, if you will, nuclear weapon system, and deployed hypersonic weapon systems on the tops of ICBMs, all of which are entire new weapon systems. So it is going to be absolutely necessary that the United States go the next step, because we can't just undertake modernization, which would be the United States placing itself in a status quo while Russia modernizes. So the Biden administration identifying this, both START as a foundation and then as the opportunity to transition to more broader arms control negotiations, which hopefully would also include China, because we also all know they're vastly expanding both their capabilities, their hypersonic capabilities, and their inventory is going to be really important. I also want to thank the French delegate for the comments with respect to the attack on the Capitol, and associate myself with Jerry Connolly's comments that this clearly illustrates that both democracy is fragile, but it's also resilient. You know, our democracy was very strong that day. You can storm a building, but you can't storm our democracy. You know, I think we certainly saw on that day that you know, our institutions are strong, even though our geography and building locations may not be. And now we need to work on coming back together as a country. And I just really appreciated Jerry's comments, because I thought they very much captured, I think, the feeling of the entire delegation.
I think, yeah. Mr. President, I see also Congressman Vella would like the floor afterwards.
Thank you. Roxandra, if I heard Lord Campbell correctly, I think he was also asking a question about the 2% commitment and whether the United States was going to continue to, push for that. You know, I will remind delegates, not all of us were there, but when, I believe, Mike, when you were still president, we had a session in the Visitor Center for members of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly who were visiting Washington, might have been around the holiday time. And that was before Trump. That was while President Obama was still president. And we all said that 2% commitment is really important. And the failure to meet it erodes support for NATO in the United States, because there is a growing sense that we're footing too much of the bill, and not, the burden is not being shared the way it should be. We said that about 5 or 6 years ago. So it predated President Trump, and it will survive President Trump. I believe Joe Biden and his new administration are as committed to exhorting our allies to meet that 2% commitment as any administration will be or has been. So I think on a bipartisan basis, we're going to continue to push for that. We think that's really important. The other observation I'd add to what Mike just said about defense posture of NATO and challenges we can anticipate, I did a white paper on China for the annual meeting we just had remotely in Athens. And I think you're going to see increasingly the United States focus longer term. We have an immediate threat, no question, with Russia. But longer term, the emerging power is China. And we've got to engage with China, but also meet any challenges China can pose, either militarily or through cyber or even economically. Competition is a good thing, but military threats and intimidation have to be met by our alliance. And China is very much in the European theater, in the Arctic, and it is something we're going to have to deal with. And obviously, there are differences of opinion about how much we engage. And I think it's going to be a very important internal dialogue and debate for the NATO alliance, how we meet a growing challenge from China. In the next few years, China will emerge as the world's largest GDP, eclipsing the United States. Its growing military posture is something we've got to watch and take cognizance of. Its willingness to encroach on the territorial sovereignty of its neighbors in the Asia-Pacific theater, as well as its very aggressive moves into other theaters, including the Arctic, which we've talked about in previous meetings, is something we just can't turn a blind eye to. And I say that because you got to remember what stunned me. The word China didn't even appear in NATO documents until a few years ago. It was as if it didn't exist. And we've got a lot of catch up to do in recognizing that challenge. And I've been really gratified that the Secretary General of NATO has been very forthright about that. I mean, engage where we can, absolutely. But, you know, we have a long history of engagement with Russia and the predecessor Soviet Union on arms control structures. We have no such history with China. In fact, we're not even sure what their internal arms control machinery looks like. Who do we talk to? It is very, very thin. And so we've got to start paying attention to that and elevate that as an issue on the agenda, not necessarily in a hostile way always, but we can't be naive about that growing challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman Vella?
Yeah, I was going to address the 2% issue as well. I think, and I think Jerry stated it as well as could be stated. But the bottom line is, I think that President Biden, to the extent that he shares all of our interest in a robust NATO partnership, he also sees that shared responsibility is just as important. So I don't think anyone should expect to see any change in our posture with respect to the 2%.
Thank you very much. Again, in the interest of time, I'm going to group questions because I keep growing. So I'll start with Alex Shelbrook from the UK.
Can you hear me? Yep.
We can hear you, Alex. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. First of all, let me just say how great it is to see our American colleagues all looking well after what happened. I'm afraid that when we look at the situation in Myanmar, and I made this comment in the chamber yesterday, is that the actions of the former president in the last 3 months, I'm afraid, has put a greater burden on the United States to take a strong stance on democracy denial in these countries, and the G7 and certainly our leadership want to stand closely together, make a very firm stance. And I know that President Biden's already made some very strong comments in that area, and I think it's important that we need to reset the balance internationally about why democracy is so important and so fragile. I wanted to really focus this on naval capabilities and activities. Jerry, you quite rightly outlined the High North, the Arctic, what's going on there. I think we also need to be aware of, and I raised this with the Foreign Secretary who recognised where this is going. South America, Chile, those areas. As we move to electric vehicles, the resources, the natural resources that will be needed are in those countries. The Middle East will start to become less relevant as we move away from oil to electric, and countries like Chile and Bolivia are going to become far more relevant. And that is probably going to put a greater burden on the United States Navy, more than any other Navy, in terms of keeping shipping lanes free, especially when you look at the Pacific arena. I think the UK, we've pushed hard, and we're glad that we're not cutting the defence budget, and we keep pushing. There's a lot of Navy needed, certainly around Baltic and the High North. But I know that there's been a strange activity, if you will, with US naval procurement since the sort of early 90s, mid-90s, think of the Zandvoort destroyers, etc., and what's going on. So really, I just wondered what comments the panel had around naval activity, naval procurement, where we see the whole international arena moving in the next couple of decades.
Thank you, Alec. Next question is from Ojar Skalnits from Latvia.
Can you hear me now? Hi. Well, first of all, greetings to President Connolly. I'm sure you like the sound of that. And to all my friends and colleagues, both in the U.S. side and in Europe. Also, I just wanted to express my sympathies for what happened on Capitol Hill. I took that very personally because I spent 15 years walking those halls of Congress in the Capitol. I have enormous respect not only for the building, but what it represents and the people that work there. And so it was very shocking to see that. Also, as a parliamentarian, I visited some parliaments here in Europe. I saw the Turkish parliament after it had been attacked. And I think that's something we could all take very personally. I have two questions. One is a very quick one, and that is the disposition of U.S. troops in Germany. The previous administration talked about relocating them. Is that something that is going to be looked at again or reversed in some way? And the second question concerns Nagorno-Karabakh. There's been a proposal recently to create this Caucasus 3+3, Turkey, Iran, Russia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia. I think our Georgian friends are in somewhat of a dilemma over this. Although they'd like to improve relations with their neighbors, they're being asked to join an organization with Russia, which is occupying parts of their territory. And I'm wondering if anyone has any comments, if the U.S. has a position or any advice that you might want to give to our Georgian friends on how they deal with this very delicate situation in their region. Thank you.
Thank you. If you bear with me, I'll take a few more because we actually have quite a lot. So I'll take the next one is Ahmed Yildiz from Turkey. See Lara. Lara's already on screen, so let me get Lara. Lara Martino from Portugal.
Hi, hello everybody. I would like to first demonstrate and express also my solidarity to our colleagues in the United States regarding the attacks on the Capitol. I was born in the United States, so for me it was also very shocking to see all the image that we saw on the news. And I think that these events demonstrate that this could happen in anywhere and that we have to protect our democracy because it's not granted. But I would like to ask some questions also regarding the transatlantic relation. How do you think that will evolve? And do you think that with this new administration we'll have a different approach to the challenge in the Atlantic, more active in the Atlantic? I would ask regarding also the presence in the American military bases in Europe, but specifically, how do you think that could be, if it could be more a bigger presence in the Lash field in the Azores, Portugal? How do you think that will, with this new administration, if we will have some changes in the presence of the American military in this space? Thank you very much.
Let me now get Ahmed Yildiz as well. List of questions is growing. And I need to close the list for questions as well. I'm not even sure we're going to be able to get through the current list, but let's get Ahmed Yildiz.
Thank you, Roxana. President Connolly, members, congressmen, congresswomen from the United States, thanks for organizing and for these remarks. First of all, of course, I wish, as a former diplomat, that Turkish-US relations return to the pre-Kobani, pre-Münbiç era. I am hopeful because the new team of Biden administration, President Biden on foreign policy, was at that time somehow involved during Obama administration. Hopefully we can mutually avoid any new mistakes, any new accidents. Secondly, President Connolly, last week I was in Strasbourg for a Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. As in any other meetings, unfortunately there are so many rhetoric among NATO allies for some years, both in the parliamentary level, sometimes even in the presidential level, which is harming the spirit of alliance among our countries. It weakens the confidence of public on the collective security, collective defense, which means when a country is attacked, others will help defend as a whole. I think as an internationalist, President Biden will prioritize and will work hard to reharmonize the alliance. But are you hopeful on this, and what the parliaments and caucuses in the parliament, friendship groups can do about it, and can we trust the US leadership, the US Congress leadership on this as parliaments of other allies? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I see Mike Turner. Yeah, Mike Turner has to go, I believe. Yeah, okay. All right. So for the others, if you don't mind, I'll take just one last one, and then we'll go back to all of you. Let me take the other Atlantic North American partner, and I take a question from Canada. Yeah, Judy? Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Good morning from Canada. And I want to, this is my first chance to say, so I want to say congratulations to you, Jerry, on becoming the president of Nato PA. I too think that President Connolly sounds wonderful. Linda, I really appreciate your comment. I chair our National Immigration and Refugee Caucus here. I'll tell you, really heartened by the President Biden administration's plan around immigration. So thanks for that. My quick question is, I'm really delighted that President Biden's looking to extend the START agreement. I want to ask about, I know that President Biden is also looking to rejoin the Iran nuclear deal. And I want to see whether you can comment on how that's sort of part of the whole non-nuclear proliferation strategy that the U.S. has in place now. The second thing I wouldn't mind if you could comment on is the increasing threat of cybersecurity. It continues to be not only one of our biggest threats, but an increasing threat in our world today. Want to sort of get maybe a sense about where the U.S. was at and sort of our work together with NATO. And then just say thanks so much for organizing today. It's such a pleasure to see everyone.
A broad set of questions. Mr. President, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much for that panoply of questions. Let me start with one I think has a forthright answer. Ojaz mentioned, will there be a reconsideration of the Trump administration's decision to reduce troop levels in Germany and redistribute them elsewhere? And I don't speak for the Biden administration, but I think absolutely that's going to be on the table. I don't believe that Joe Biden believes that upon reflection is a prudent decision. And the alliance between the United States and Germany is a very strong one, needs to be strengthened, and I would expect that the administration would certainly have that at the very top of the agenda for review and reconsideration. So I would expect some changes there. At least I'll predict that. I don't speak for the administration, none of us do. But knowing President Biden and his commitment to the alliance and to individual partnerships and alliances, I cannot imagine that he would be comfortable leaving that decision unexamined. I appreciate the comments from our French colleague about looking at non-theater activities where we need to be coordinating, and he mentioned particularly the Sahel, and I agree with him. I think that we have to sort of work in tandem. Our Turkish colleague exhorts us to reharmonize frayed relationships, and I certainly think the United States will be committed to doing that. But in a family, when we have differences, sometimes the best policy is to air those differences and address them. And as I said, I think you're going to see, especially after what we went through on January 6th, the threat internally to democracy, the need for a forthright commitment to democratic values is not something to be taken for granted. It is something that is subject to challenge from external threats, but also internal threats. And we need to be very candid and very strong about addressing those threats, whether it be the United States, whether it be Turkey, whether it be anybody else in the alliance. If we don't do that, it weakens our ability, frankly, to address the external challenges to democratic values. And so I just think that's going to be really important. And sometimes candid discussions make us uncomfortable. And I understand that, but I also think that in the long run, we're strengthened and made better by those kinds of conversations. Alec talked about the need to be focused on, as the energy economy shifts to new technologies, new kinds of mineral dependence are going to arise, and that changes the geography. And I think that's probably true. And I think we're going to have to pay a lot more attention to the Southern Hemisphere than maybe we have in the past. So well said. And then final one I can remember is Nagorno-Karabakh. For the United States and frankly for our alliance, I think that geography is very challenging and very difficult for us to put a flag in the ground and intervene in a positive way. It's a very difficult situation. It's been festering for a long time. It's a dispute that comes up in almost every one of our meetings at Nato Parliamentary Assembly since I've been a member, and unfortunately, of course, led to tragic conflict and the deaths of many men and women on both sides. Obviously, we'd like to see that resolved peacefully, and I think we ought to try to make sure that that isn't something that's only resolved by Russia. And frankly, I think if you want any kind of lasting peace, it's got to involve more than Russia as an arbiter. But we're going to have to sort of tread lightly in finding our way to a productive role that makes sense given the geography. And the final thing I think I heard was about Iran. I think the United States absolutely wants to get back into JCPOA, the Iran nuclear agreement, but it is going to require a commitment from the Iranians and there have been positive noises in this regard, to roll back their behavior in breaching the metrics, the limits we set under the JCPOA. Now, Iran basically made the argument that we get to do that because you pulled out of the agreement. Why would we adhere to an agreement that really no longer is in force? And so if the United States is saying, no, we're going to re-up and we're going to absolutely keep to the terms of that agreement, which involves lifting sanctions selectively, I hope that will instill enough confidence in the Iranian government to then come back to the table and agree to the previous metrics set by the JCPOA, which, by the way, to their credit, they had met. They had met every term of the Iran nuclear agreement before the Trump administration decided abruptly to pull out. But I believe that if we don't resuscitate that agreement, we're going to have a nuclear Iran, and that's going to destabilize the region in a very profound way. So I think it's in everybody's interest that we try to resurrect that agreement and with a series of both carrots and sticks. I'm sorry that was so long, but I was trying to respond to the many questions we got. Thank you.
Excellent. I think, yeah, the only one perhaps we've left out is cyber, and that's certainly one for Linda Sanchez, given the topic of her reports. Congresswoman Sanchez.
Sure. So we have had ongoing discussions within NATO PA about cyber attacks and about misinformation campaigns. And I think what I will try to focus on is how do we combat those? What tools do we have to try to stop the spread of misinformation, and in the United States, these crazy conspiracy theories that are not based in fact? So my hope is that we will address it in a very practical, toolkit for folks to take back to their respective parliamentary or legislative branches for consideration. And then just really quickly on the issue of immigration, I've served in the United States Congress for 18 years. As long as I've been in Congress, we've been trying to reform our immigration system to make it humane and efficient and fair and transparent and accountability, and to protect our country's security. And when we can separate out those who want to come for legitimate reasons from those who want to come for bad reasons, and we have an orderly process, that makes us safer and stronger as a country. So I think it's a really important topic that, we will attempt to once and for all get our hands around and fix this term, which I'm very excited about.
Thank you very much. Congressman Vella, last few words.
Yeah, so the first question, I think, was with respect to our naval posture. And I think that by challenging the United States below the level of armed conflict, Russia and China have been avoiding U.S. military strength by operating in these blind spots. This is going to have to change. The two decisive theaters where the Navy should show up and sustain a significant presence are the South China Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean. In its 2021 budget, the U.S. Navy requested $580 million for research and development of unmanned vessels. And I think that this appropriation is essential so that the future Navy will include large and medium unmanned surface vessels so that we can, confront these challenges that we have from China. On the Iran nuclear deal, I agree with Jerry. I happen to be probably the only member of Congress on this call that voted against the deal last time. That was a mistake. So I'm fully supporting administrative efforts to go back in and partner with our allies so that we can continue peace, continue our path towards peace and harmony in the future. On the issue of immigration, we're fortunate to have Linda leading that effort. And the thing is we've seen so many different things about immigration. DACA is certainly important, and we're constantly confronting these crises of people coming across, through Mexico from Central America. But at the end of the day, probably the most important thing is that we still have millions and millions of people who've been living and working here in the agricultural fields, in construction jobs, restaurants, you name it. And these people are the heartbeat of our economy. They are the people that are suffering the most in the midst of this pandemic. And now more than ever, it's going to be important for us to give them that pathway to citizenship that they deserve. And then one last point on the issue of Germany. I agree with it. It's kind of hard right now because this presidency is only a week old, and with the devastating consequences of the pandemic on everybody's mind, that's where our current focus is. So we don't really know exactly where the Biden administration is going to be on some of these very important issues. But I suspect that Jerry is right, that we will continue to maintain our presence, the number of troops that we had prior to President Trump's order in Germany. But I'm also mindful, having, I was there with you, Oyaz, in Latvia and had been in northeastern Poland. So I understand how important it is. I've seen firsthand how vital our shared presence with our allies is at our bases in Poland and Latvia and other Eastern countries. So we'll just have to kind of wait to see what this administration does on that front.
Thank you very much indeed, and I need to apologize to all the members who still wanted to ask questions, but members of the U.S. delegation need to go on to other appointments, and Mike Turner had to leave early. He sends his apologies as well. I do want to thank President Connolly, Congresswoman Sanchez, and Congressman Vela very much for this conversation. And Mr. President, and indeed for the members who couldn't ask questions, a reminder that the second part of our forum will take place on 26th of March, and we'll have more opportunities to discuss these issues. Then, President, final words to you.
I just want to thank everybody for participating today. And again, we went through a trauma on January 6th at the United States Capitol, but we have recovered. And the mob did not prevail. And, a building at the end of the day is a building, but the core of democracy is a set of values and commitments we share. And that core withstood a pretty dramatic challenge. And I hope that reminds all of us why shared values, democratic values, commitments to those democratic values is so important and has to be enhanced and fought for in every generation. Democracy, to be resilient, has to be refreshed and needs new adherents and fresh commitments. And we're going through that process in our own country. And I think every member of the alliance is probably going through some kind of process with respect to that. And at the end of the day, I believe we'll be stronger having been tested. Thank you so much for your words of support. Thank you for your commitment to this alliance. And we look forward to working with all of you live and in person in the not so distant future.
Thank you very much. And many thanks again to all of you for participating, to our interpreters, and to all my colleagues who helped put this meeting together. Take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.